Welcome on to Hollinger and Duncan. Since this is a public episode, we are going live on YouTube. Maybe even take some comments afterwards as well, if we have time for it, on the adjustments and all the things that have gone right and wrong here in the first two games. We've got two games down so far in each series. Johnny, do you have any general thoughts on how these playoffs are going so far? Are you enjoying it? Style of play? Anything stick out to you?
Chalky. We wish there was maybe a little more intrigue. We have three series that are tied 1-1, right? And the other five are 2-0. Even the series that are 1-1, 2/3 of the time, the team with home court advantage wins those. When it goes home team wins, then away team. So you'd like to see maybe a little more intrigue in a couple of these series, but I think the way the games have been played have been really entertaining. I think the change in officiating has been helpful. And so I've enjoyed I've enjoyed the individual games, even if the series end up being uninteresting by the middle of the week.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Obviously, Game 3 is going to tell it in a lot of these, especially some that are maybe unexpectedly 2-0, but have been close. I would say I'm disappointed just because of the players who've been out. On Sunday, every game featured one team missing its best player. So, and Kawhi is back now. He struggled in game 2. I'm sure we'll hit on that series, but that was a little disappointing, particularly because two of those guys got hurt in the play-in, and we've had a very healthy season this year in terms of all-stars not missing games. Other guys have missed games, but for whatever reason, all-stars hadn't that much. And then you have this rash at the end of basically having, probably 4 of the top 20 players in the NBA getting hurt in the last 2-3 weeks of the season, and 2 in the play-in. So let's start with this. We kind of go through these categories every week during the playoffs. Who's the best team so far to you?
I think Minnesota's been really impressive in these first two games. The way they've taken it to a Phoenix team that we thought might beat them. And it just hasn't happened that way at all. Defensively, they've been able to stay solid. I think offensively, they've been able to hurt the Suns with their size and with Anthony Edwards and with their depth. Even with Kyle Anderson going out, their bench has kicked Phoenix's ass. So I just think across the board, an impressive start for Minnesota. Even though I don't know how ultimately, like how much championship equity do they have? Probably not a ton, but very impressive first two games from them.
Yeah, I've been getting this question, actually. I wouldn't say that Minnesota is the best team just in a vacuum. I'd still say, Denver would have to be there. And, I've been very impressed by what I've seen from the Thunder in the first two games as well. But I think in terms, like, most impressive relative to pre-series expectations, I'd certainly have to say Minnesota if you're interpreting that question that way. And so let me ask you this. You said, you don't think they have that much championship equity. Why not? Just because they have to play the Denver Nuggets, or anything else besides that?
Do they have one of the 10 best players in the league right now? No. Do they have a history of overachieving in the playoffs? No. I just say they have a difficult pathway, and they don't have that like elite superstar to carry them there. Ant may eventually get there. He's not there right now. And so for a 56 win team, I think you would assign them unusually low odds of getting a championship, given that they are a 56 win team with a top 3 seed, which historically the barometer for winning a championship has been top 3 seed, win at least, I forget, it was 52 or 53 games was the bar. And there's only 4 such teams this year. I think you would put your chips pretty heavily on one of the other 3 before you put them on Minnesota.
Yeah, well, so you would say OKC above Minnesota even? Right,
Yes.
those teams are unlikely to play one another. Oh man, if that series happened, that would be such a interesting clash of styles. And Minnesota Denver looks like we're headed that way. I think people have been looking forward to that one since the 1-8 series last year as well.
That was a good series, even though it went 5, like good series last year. So yeah.
I guess maybe the question is, like, whether Phoenix just sucks or not, or whether like Minnesota is really like making them suck, which they are to some degree. I mean, this will come up in some other category. I've just been incredibly disappointed by the Suns, but also, like Minnesota has caused a bunch of problems for them, and like just their pressure has taken them out of what they wanted to do, and they didn't want to do anything that was really that genius anyway to begin with. So,
definitely. I mean, the flip side of that, we're only seeing 2 teams in these series, right? So definitely like disappointing from Phoenix, right?
yeah, and they just haven't been able to match the Wolves' physicality. And again, that'll come up a little bit more in some other categories to be sure. But yeah, this series, I made the observation after game 2 that this series reminds me of some series of the past where they've just like overwhelmed the opposition, right? There's just sort of a feeling of it's like, yeah, they don't have anything to go to. They're not getting good shots. Like they're just physically can't match them at all.
Yeah.
The series it kind of reminded me a little bit of was Lakers Rockets in 2020 in the bubble, where I think the Rockets won game 1 of that series, and I felt like, oh, they're going to spread them out. Like the Lakers offense isn't that great, but as it turned out, like their size and defensive intensity just completely overwhelmed Houston. And by game 3 of that series, you're just like, yeah, the series is over. Like they can't.
It's over.
Like, there's no solution for the athleticism and size deficit that they're facing.
It's always amazing, right? That moment in a series when you're like, wow, they got nothing for these guys. And you still want to see what happens when the series goes to Phoenix. I mean, we've seen so many series go completely upside down once the venue changes. But, man, it is not looking good for Phoenix.
Yeah, but, I mean, especially, like, the Wolves shot, like, under 30% from 3 and blew them out in game 2, right? Yeah. Like, so it's just, like, I was
Towns in foul trouble and everything. Yeah.
All right, so would you edit your overall predictions at all, either for these series, there'll be some obvious ones there, or just for what's going to happen later based on these 2 games?
My big picture, I don't think I would change yet. That Boston game last night was not enough to scare me off a Boston prediction. Miami just completely out the ass shooting. Tip your hat to them. They made 6 baskets at the rim the entire game. I don't see that as being sustainable. And then I had Denver as their opponent, which I'm still rocking with that. I would say the Minnesota Phoenix series prediction is the one I'm regretting the most, because I had Phoenix winning that series in 6 based on how the regular season series went, and that just does not look like that's happening at all.
Yeah, I would say so too. Again, just the athleticism and size deficit. Like, I don't know that goes away when you get home necessarily. Not having Grayson Allen is also going to hurt a little bit. Well, so you're not concerned at all by what you saw from Boston in game 2? I still obviously favor them to win this series. I don't think Miami has enough offensively, but were there any red flags for you in that game?
I think Miami provided a roadmap, maybe on the defensive end of, if you're going to beat Boston, you can't get caught in this rotate and they get you running around, they move it around the perimeter, and they're going to kill you from the 3-point line. You just have to play them one-on-one and live with it. And they did a good job of that. They did a good job of the other thing is, when you switch against Boston this year, that's been different from past years, is that now instead of being stale, now they can throw it into Porzingis potentially with a size mismatch. I thought Miami did a really good job of making those entries difficult. And so that is a roadmap for stopping that, or at least limiting that amazing Boston offense. But it requires personnel that I'm not sure every team has, in terms of having multiple big-ish, quick defenders that you can toggle around to do that. And obviously you have the most switchable 5 in the league with Bam. Like, who else is Boston does that?
Right, exactly. Yeah, you can't. There aren't other teams who are like, oh yeah, we'll just put our center on Jason Tatum as the primary matchup.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
which was a fucking genius move, by the way. I mean, that'll be one of our best adjustments so far. I mean, I think that really just helped so much to avoid putting them in rotation. And now you'd say, well, hey, they're like Bam's guarding Jason Tatum, like he's pretty good. Like, can't you beat some of these other guys one on one? And they weren't really able to do it. Like Drew Holiday had a really, really rough game. Like I was hopeful that part of the theory of Boston was, all right, you get Tyler Hero guarding Drew Holiday, you just go right through Tyler Hero, like force the double team. I thought Drew could have done a little better job of passing in those situations too, but he wasn't able to score. So
yeah, and Porzingis was terrible too. So Boston will play better, surely.
Well, yeah. So I mean, that to me though, that his inability to beat that coverage, like yes, you're gonna have to put your center on him sometimes, but they are gonna switch that some of these other teams, and then you're gonna end up with him against a smaller player, and he wasn't able to beat that. I think they need to have a little bit better of an approach there, trying to get him the ball closer to the rim. But he had these great numbers as a post-up guy. It certainly was very effective. But as I watched the film of that, I know I'm only supposed to look at the stats, and I never watched the games. But I was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. Like he's not. If you don't foul him when he like turns to his right shoulder and tries to go up through your arm, and you can kind of get your body into him a little bit, like it's all right. It's gonna make 46% of those shots from like right at the dotted line, because he can't really like turn and face and just like knock whoever he's being guarded by, knock you back into the goal. Like Jared Weiss wrote a great piece about that, of how
I bet he could knock Lou Dort over.
Oh my god. Well, Lou lets himself get knocked over on occasion, but
he does.
Yeah. Well, he flops. Yeah, he drew like 4 offensive fouls in that game. But anyway, so Porzingis, like when he reimagined his post-up game, which was good, like he's made himself a lot better. They found when he dribbles, like his efficiency goes down. When he tries to face up and put the ball on the floor, his efficiency goes down because he's just not that quick. He can't get by anyone. He can't kind of use his size in that way. So if he gets it at the nail, like it's going to just be a jump shot. And especially when you're hitting every 3, you can probably live with that. Let's see, what's our next category here? Or any other predictions you would edit? I mean, have you seen anything from Denver? There are like relative struggles in the first 2 that bothers you at all?
Probably not overly worried yet. I probably wouldn't take too much away from those. I do think Denver has to incorporate the 3-point line maybe a little more than they have.
Yeah, well, they shot terribly in game 2 and still ended up winning. And I think the Lakers have done a good job of actually forcing some of these guys who don't want to shoot threes to shoot a little bit more than they would like. But no, I'm not that worried. Like they had the game from hell. Murray is going to start shooting better than he has over the first 2. So I think they'll be fine. I mean, I can see the Lakers getting a game, maybe even 2 in this series. Are you still going Boston in 5, by the way, in that other series?
Yeah, I think that was the one.
Yeah. The one thing I'm concerned about with Denver is if one of the guys in the starting lineup like has to miss a couple of games with a sprained ankle.
Yep.
That could be a little tough.
Such a clear vulnerability with the Nuggets. That's why I think people are just like, "Oh, Denver's just gonna coast." It's like, well, let's wait a minute here. Like, you're one ankle away from Reggie Jackson playing 37 minutes in a game 5. Like let's just chill a little here.
What'd you have in Knicks Sixers?
I had New York winning that series. I can't remember how many games, but I had it as a long series, either 6 or 7.
Yeah, I think you must have had 7 actually when we talked about it. Now that I think about it, so yeah, that's looking pretty good so far. But yeah, I still think that will be a little bit longer of a series. When it's 2-0, you never want to put too many eggs in that basket of it being a long series, because one more result and the series is over, right? So, but I think Philly can come out and play a little bit better than they have. Is Joel Embiid, like, is he going to get a hand transplant in between games 2 and 3? Like, he could not. Can we not
focus on the knee for a second and focused on the rebounds that hit his hands and just harmlessly bounced away to Knicks? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, now being injured sometimes mentally, like it kind of, some guys in particular can kind of sap their concentration, and they're all of a sudden they're not able to do some of the things that they could normally do. But yeah, I mean, it was zero rebounds in the second half was pretty tough. All right, let's yeah, any other pre-series predictions that you would trade? What'd you have in Milwaukee, Indiana?
I had Milwaukee winning that again, and I think I had 6 games.
Yeah.
By the way, it's been so fucking cool to see Portland Dame back in these first 2 games.
Yeah. Man, if you could put Dame and AD together and only have them play first halves, I mean, that would be the most unstoppable team we've ever seen in our lives.
Burr.
So yeah, I mean that has been nice to see, but that is kind of tough. I mean, the Bucks, I think I had them in 6-2, but that was based on Giannis coming back for game 3, and it does not appear like he's close right now. I mean, if he doesn't come back, Indiana's going to win the series, right?
I'm not 100% sure on that.
Well, and Middleton is also
The
questionable
problem
for
now
game
is
3 now. Did you see
Middleton.
that?
Like if he's out too,
Yeah.
then the Bucks. I mean, because they have the Bucks' second line players just aren't very good. But by the way, we actually had an AJ Green ISO against Ben Shepherd in the first quarter of an NBA playoff game the other day. I just want to note this moment in history, this incredibly improbable thing that somehow came to pass.
That's really terrifying. I think I actually was on the other game at that time, so I missed that part of it. Thank God. What would you say is the prediction you're feeling the best about so far that you made? There was maybe like kind of controversial. Probably New York.
Yeah, New York surviving in a tough series, I think is probably would probably be the one.
Yeah.
I mean, I had Dallas in 7 against the Clippers, which seems like we're like maybe trending toward that. We'll see how that goes.
I mean, honestly, I know New York won the first 2 games. I'm actually feeling pretty good about my Philly pick, even so, because I was like, they're not gonna be able to score in the half court. I don't think Brunson's gonna have a good series, and that's kind of been the case. I thought they're gonna get out coached. I would actually say they have kind of been out coached in terms of like the defense on Brunson, and just literally having no one else who can initiate the offense at any time for New York. I mean, that's just really tough. And then also you throw in Embiid, as much as he's struggled at times, they've been able to get nothing against him around the rim. And then, I did also think New York could beat them in all the floor game stuff, and they'd have. But I mean, I think like the series has gone relatively close to the way that I thought it would. Like Philly should have won one of those first 2 games. They just didn't.
Yeah.
So I don't feel that terrible about picking Philly. I mean, now obviously they're a massive underdog down 2-0. Yeah, worst prediction obviously was Phoenix. They're getting killed. I think I'm feeling pretty decent about OKC making the conference finals. You had that too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think many people would have had. I think people had whoever the Clippers Dallas winner was, like, beating them. I don't think either of those teams match up amazingly well against OKC personally. So, let's who would you say has done the best coaching job? Any like real coaching adjustments you really thought were particularly good?
I thought the Clippers were really well prepared for Dallas in game 1. The way they attacked
Yeah.
Gafford right away with Zubats on the block, the way they had when Kleber was in at the 4, they just ran away from him and sent They put Westbrook on him, just sent Westbrook to double whoever, Luka or Kyrie, whoever had the ball. Like totally ignored Kleber. Like the level of disrespect they had for Dallas's second line guys in that game was actually really jarring. It makes you kind of worry about Dallas, even if they win this series, like going ahead. So I give kudos to the Clippers for that. Game 2 didn't go quite as well. I think Kawhi kind of playing, but not really being Kawhi kind of threw things off a little bit. And then I'll give credit to Chris Finch for not overreacting and making the adjustment too early to what happened in the regular season against those guys. And he kind of said, okay, we're gonna put Towns on KD and we're just gonna match up and play our defense and see what happens. And then we'll if you make us adjust, we'll adjust. But otherwise, I guess actually they did make an adjustment a little bit because they were trying to put Towns on Grayson Allen, if I remember right. In the
Well,
last regular
they
season
did
games.
that. Yeah, that's right. So they kind of unadjusted, which
Yeah,
seemed like
yeah.
that worked great. And KD was killing Towns in game one, and then in game two, I thought he did a really nice job of seeing that Naz Reid kind of didn't have it, and then going small, basically putting Alexander Walker in for the foul-addled Towns, and then that worked great too. I thought KD would have a pretty more of an advantage against McDaniels than he did. And again, this gets back to some of the Phoenix offensive process, which we can discuss. And then they've just been changing up their coverages a lot too, just never letting Phoenix completely get comfortable. And particularly without a point guard, they just have struggled
Thrown
to
in
get
some
organized.
zone even against them.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously Rudy has been fantastic as well. They've been willing to switch Rudy out, particularly late clock. They put two on the ball at times as well. They've played Rudy in that traditional drop. So they've done a lot of different things. I think he's been really good with the player usage and also just, staying solid with Towns being like, all right, we'll let KD get his. And if he wants to have 31 points and 1 assist, like we can survive that. And they did. I thought Ty Lue, to piggyback on your point, to me, he's taken too long to adjust in some other series, and knowing that Kawhi was out, coming in, throwing the kitchen sink with like the Zubats post ups and all the stuff you were talking about, it was fantastic. I think Mark Daignault just not really doing any switching at all has been great. Just put Lou Dort on Ingram as a set it and forget it. Put Jalen Williams on CJ as a set it and forget it. And so anytime there's an off-ball screen, even if it's involving two guards, like most teams just switch that, right? And then the other team gets the matchup they want. And they're just not doing that, particularly because, CJ, Ingram, these aren't just like, devastating cutters and off-ball players. Like they're not like so fast that you just can't keep up with them coming off the screen. Like they're able to stay attached pretty well. That's also let Chet stay home a little bit. There was a brief point where CJ kind of got going on off the dribble threes late in game one, but they've really stuck with that and held him to 92 points 2 games in a row. Although, how do you feel about the whole saga of the challenge, the jump ball challenge in game one?
My
From
goodness. My goodness.
the
Are we
challenge
getting
god.
into our worst now?
But he had an excuse though.
What was his excuse?
No, didn't you see that like the league had to clarify?
They had to clarify that
like,
he would
what the
also
rule
lose
was?
that he would also lose the timeout, which
because he said afterwards.
if you screw up a challenge so badly that they change it to a situation that's even worse than the initial state that you were protesting, yes, you lost your challenge, you deserve to lose the timeout. End of discussion.
I agree, but they had interpreted it differently earlier in the year, and that's what he was basing it on, apparently. Couple other things we could talk about. We already talked about.
We need to talk about the other thing that made that challenge horrible, though. Like, not just that he lost it and he went from a jump ball to the other team's possession, but that he had a 7'1" guy jumping against Najee Marshall and used his challenge.
Yeah, I can't defend it anymore. I just can't do it.
I've said all year that he's the best challenge coach, and then in his first playoff game, just completely shits the bed on the challenge.
Well, the thing that was so easy too, or so crazy about it was they're like lined up for the jump ball, and he takes it. Like they were like someone must have said to him, "Yeah, do it."
Someone from behind the bench must have told him they were going to win it. But on those out of bounds plays, they zapruder that shit, and it is so tough to tell.
If they couldn't tell it in real time, like it's got to be tough. Spo putting Bam on Porzingis and just the general approach there. I thought Kidd so ballyhooed these centers for Dallas, right? And yeah, Gafford has been hurt with the back issue and the ankle issue, and Lively, I thought, actually, given some of the things that he's going through, played pretty well. But for Kidd, with all that they've put into, they traded a first for Gafford, they drafted Lively with a first, and he went with old standby Moxie Kleba, who hit at least one 3-pointer, which was enough. So the other thing I would say that I really liked from Kidd was just being willing to just switch Luka Doncic onto whoever and just live with it. Like correctly assessing that it doesn't need to be like a switch double. It can just Luka Doncic can be a handle those guys.
And I mean, it helped that Luka really handled those guys. That's one of the best individual defensive games I think we've seen him play.
Yeah. Well, it's quickness that gets him more so than, and also like being involved in screening actions or like guys coming downhill at him fast. And then also like some of his deficiencies is the low man. I think, he's strong. His feet are not bad. He's got good anticipation in a one-on-one situation. And like the Clippers don't actually have anyone who's like fast enough to get around him at all. Like maybe Kawhi later in the series, but they tried to go at him, and now their process was completely atrocious.
Yes.
But they were just like, and they're playing late in the clock, and they also had no spacing, and Kawhi was rusty, and so like they could be better there. But that was a good adjustment, I thought. Not overreacting to Luka's guarding Kawhi Leonard. Let's see. Nurse, the way that they've defended Brunson has been brilliant. Basically doing the James Harden play behind him all the way, like even
Twitter.
into floater range. Yeah.
Yeah. They put size on him, and if the player is screened behind him, just stay behind and rear contest, and that's been a problem for him. And it's hard for New York when this is actually where I do think they miss Randall a little bit, that there's just no other thing to even distract the Sixers from honing in on Brunson.
No, I completely agree. There's just like Hart, DiVincenzo, these guys, McBride, they can dribble the ball up, but it's always going to just devolve into Brunson coming out of the corner and trying to get a handoff or something, right? Like there just is literally no one else who can be the initial person trying to get the ball into the paint. It's just a massive, massive burden. And generally, teams have reacted to that by like trying to double team him and get the ball out of his hands, and then those guys can attack on the backside. But they haven't really done that at all. And so with Embiid there, Brunson can't get all the way to the rim, and he's not comfortable with the floater because the guy's behind him. Because usually what he'll do is the guy will try to get back in front, and Booker, Luke are all really good at this. The moment the guy tries to think oh, I'm about to get back in front, that's when he pulls the jumper, and the guy's momentum just takes him right past him, and he gets an easy 15-footer. They're just never trying to get back in front of him. Juke points out in the comments, by the way, that it was Larry Nance who was going to be the guy that Chet was jumping against. Still probably had the advantage there. But a little bit less of one. I think he's right about that. All right, that's about all I got, I think, on the good adjustments. Any kind of bad coaching issues that stuck out to you?
Look, I mean, Orlando is overmatched, but I do think they made things harder on themselves by just not playing any spacing lineups. They're still trying to play Markelle Fultz.
Do you recall on a certain show, a certain person predicted that Jamal Mosley would play Markelle Fultz, and you said, no, he'll be out of the rotation for sure. That obviously would have been the right move, but I had faith of a type, at least, in Jamal Mosley.
Yeah. So I didn't mind starting Isaac because like his numbers this year defensively especially are just freaking monstrous. So I could live with that one, but they just the whole game they're going through, there's just no shooting out there at all. They tried Caleb Houston, I guess, in game 2 for like a little mini second. But that it just points to, I mean, this offseason, Orlando, for them to go anywhere important with this group, even though they're young, they have some talent, they got to get some freaking shooting, man. I mean, there's just no space in that offense in the half court. Cleveland's a good defensive team, so it magnifies the problem. Uh, but yeah, they got to figure out how to get some shooting out there. I think they got to try to play Cole Anthony more, even though I'm sure Cleveland's going to hunt him,
Yeah,
every
someday he'll get
time.
his first field goal of the series if he plays long enough, right?
He has not made a strong case for inclusion in the rotation. I would agree with that, but just from an offensive perspective, they got to get more out there than they have on the court right now.
I think that's definitely true. And Ingles, the Cavs have done a good job of going at him. I felt like JB would be kind of a step ahead of his good buddy Mosley, just having been in the playoffs before. And now Mosley did go for one adjustment that I actually didn't like. Because normally the playoff adjustment is the one everyone knows that you need to do, that you just wait too long to do.
Mm-hmm.
And John Isaac didn't fall into that category for me necessarily. I mean, he's a great defensive player. They started him in the last game against the Bucks. It worked great, but Wendell was struggling with some health issues. I'm not sure where he's at with that now. But to me, Isaac is so bad offensively that I think Wendell, he's not amazing, but I think Wendell's a better shooter. They both missed a ton over the first two games, but Wendell to me is a better shooter. He's a much better passer, and like you can run some DHO stuff through him. Isaac has no chance to finish around the basket against this Cavs team either. Wendell even could maybe like duck in for a post up against a switch or something, which Isaac can't do. Again, he's not a panacea, but I thought that really took their first unit out of rhythm offensively because they just don't have enough initiating and passing. So I think that was, I would go, and also then you break up the Isaac Mo Wagner, which had killed everybody all year, and I don't think
Mm-hmm.
Wendell and Mo Wagner is nearly as good of a group on the second unit. So I would probably go back to starting Wendell. I think that kind of hasn't worked. And then they went to the
Yeah.
all bench lineup at the start of the second and fourth quarters. At
Yeah.
times that was terrible. Speaking of that, Carlisle, I thought he kind of like his team just wasn't ready to play in game one, but also some of his rotation, like the all bench unit to start the second quarter, they kind of fired that game away. It was 20 points after that, and the game was over. So it
Yeah, when
didn't
Doug
really care for
McDermott
that.
checked in, I was like, what is happening here? Like what the hell?
Yeah, but I thought Carlisle did a nice job. Went to Obi Toppin at backup center to juice the pace in game two, and he was okay in the first half, not so much in the second half. And staggered Siakam and Halliburton perfectly. No McConnell only backup group. So he reacted, and they didn't just give up all these stupid system buckets on random double teams, and they actually but a lot of it too is that Miles Turner just played way better, and Rick got a lot of guys to play a lot better than they did in game one, just from a defensive execution standpoint. Anything else that stuck out to you in terms of coaching stuff that you didn't care for?
I don't know if this falls totally under coaching, but like Milwaukee's transition defense was so bad in game two,
Yeah.
and Indiana just ran them and I mean, Indiana was really good too about just hammering them with with pace and pushing it, but just anytime somebody went for an offensive board and fell down on the baseline or was looking at the ref for half of a second, the Pacers were just gone and it was a bucket.
Yeah, I think that was pretty obvious to me. Malik Beasley only playing 10 minutes, and certainly he was making plenty of mistakes, but they also they didn't really have enough at all offensively in that game. And they only had, I think, 12 2-point field goals in the game. Or no, I think they're 12 of 22 at the rim in the game. But they only had 2-point field goals in the first quarter, although they were hitting a bunch of threes. So, yeah, I mean, Beasley is not the greatest effort in the world, but there's a few times and you never want to be in this position as a coach, but where you're just you know what? I know this guy's playing like shit, but we can't win without him. We got to just get this guy going. And Pat Beverly is 0 for 2 or whatever it was in 34 minutes. It gets to be a little rough. Let's see here. I don't think that in the same vein that completely going away from Dante Exum, particularly now with Hardaway Jr. out, is a great look for Dallas. Like Derek Jones Jr. was playing well, but he still can't hit a three. Like just giving up on Exum's ability to hit shots after a game and a half when he's made them for the last 2 years in Europe and then this year, I think that was, and he still gives you something on defense, and also is just a guy who can bring the ball up playing when Luka and Kyrie are on the bench. So if Luka plays 46 minutes, there's a little less need for Exum.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to need to get something out of him in this series. I think just going completely away from him is not the answer. Controversial opinion. I think the Hardaway Jr. injury may actually help Dallas.
Because they won't play Hardaway. they'll put Exum back in the mix. Maybe a little more.
Well, recall in 22 he was out as well, right? And they feel like he's kind of their only shooter off the bench, so they feel like they kind of need to play him. But I thought it was very telling in the fourth quarter how the Clippers just didn't have any scabs to pick at defensively. Any other coaching stuff? I got one more.
I mean, just generally with New Orleans, again, they're undermanned, so you don't want to be too harsh on them. But you do feel like they're leaving some money on the table with just being so Ingram dependent. And I know you have a note here you want to make too, so I'll let you have that.
Yeah. So I think the obvious thing that a lot of teams do is just putting the center on Josh Giddey, and it's hard for me to say why it is that they haven't gone to that yet when Giddey has been out there, because JV has gotten lit up pretty badly. You could go even Nance there as well. So I don't really get the idea behind that. I mean, maybe they feel like they then, McCollum has to kind of hide on Giddey as well, and but McCollum could also hide on Dort. So I'm not sure exactly why they haven't at least tried that yet, and at least like run some plays at Josh Giddey, right? And run some plays for Trey Murphy, particularly if Brandon Ingram can't get going at all. Like
they don't run any pin down shit for him, and
because they're not switching on the perimeter, right? Like you need to recognize what their scheme is, and like so you just have Brandon Ingram screen. Now Brandon Ingram will have to actually set a screen, but like have Brandon Ingram set a pin down for Trey Murphy, and then Trey's been spacing the floor, but like force Josh Giddey to get through a screen, because that's the matchup is Josh Giddey on Trey Murphy.
Yeah. The other more radical thing I wonder if they could try, especially with second units, is bringing in Jordan Hawkins and saying if you're not going to switch, we're going to run pin downs for this kid all day.
No, I think you're right about that. It's try it, because I mean they have 92 points in each of the first two games. Like they're going to have to find something. But the problem with OKC is they always space the floor, and they always have guys who can just go at somebody and get involved in screening action. So I think they're just very concerned about the ability of Hawkins to defend, and not getting anything out of Alvarado in this series has really hurt them too.
Yeah. He just hasn't done anything. He's one where you just have to keep going to him and hope he plays better in game 3. But yeah, that's definitely hurt them. I think that's why I said Hawkins with the bench unit. There's more guys he can hide against when OKC goes to that second group. When Shea's out there with 4 subs or whatever, you can pick your matchup for him a little more easily.
I don't know. Don't you think like Gordon Hayward might just go right at him?
Hey, he did manage a field goal attempt finally. So I have to update. The cardio update I sent out at halftime last night has to be updated to include his 5 garbage time minutes. So he's now up to, I think, 20 minutes on the series with 1 field goal attempt.
And that one barely grazed the rim as well. All right, most players you've been most surprised by, like who's shown you something that you didn't know they had in these first two.
Okay, so I think we talked about the Knicks not having anyone who can dribble, but I think the surprise to me is that Deuce McBride on multiple occasions has been able to get all the way to the cup off the dribble. And this is a guy, when he first came to the league, he could not get separation at all. And that was the thing keeping him out of an NBA rotation. And so to see him maneuver off the dribble multiple times, left hand, right hand, and get all the way to the cup in this series, it's been like, oh, okay. I didn't know you had that in your bag. So that's been notable to me. And it makes me wonder if like one of the Knicks adjustments might be actually to play him next to Brunson more as this series goes on.
Yeah, they did go that way. They benched DiVincenzo in game one. I thought Tibbs has been pretty good with the player usage. Like McBride was great, plus 37 in game one. Then he actually did go back to DiVincenzo, though, in game two. And obviously that paid off with that classic sequence.
Mm-hmm.
I would say George Niang being able to like slide his feet and stay in front of Paolo Banchero has been pretty good. I thought that Paolo was going to cook that matchup. And certainly there's been no spacing and there's been rim production behind him. But Paolo hasn't even necessarily been able to like get the initial advantage on Niang to force a double team.
Yeah, definitely. And it's made up for the fact that Niang hasn't done shit on offense. But Niang's an important player for Cleveland because with Dean Wade being out, they don't have another place to go when they get into their second unit. Like he has to play and they just have to live with however he's playing.
Yeah, I misspoke. There's actually 5 teams that are missing their best player in the first round with Dean Wade out.
wrong D Wade.
Yeah, anyone else that you're surprised by?
I would say, Zubats was really good.
The post ups.
I don't know if I'd quite call that a surprise, but it reinforced like this guy's a good player and he can do some stuff outside of what the Clippers typically have him do.
For me, this is a positive surprise because I just didn't know where these guys were health wise. But Lillard and Donovan Mitchell, like both looking pretty good physically.
It's okay. So second quarter of game one was when I knew the series was over because Mitchell got a fast break or whatever and just like soared and pounded home a dunk and had his head at rim level. I was like, okay. He's
second dunk since the All-Star break for Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah.
And then I would say Jaden McDaniels. I mean, that game that he had in game two was really, really impressive.
Found money if you're the Wolves. Absolutely.
Well, and I like the way that he can just like catch the ball into the basket and just like go up and dunk off of vert is pretty nice. Like he'll get a couple buckets per game that way.
No, surprises. We got to talk about because I think maybe for you and me, not that huge a surprise, but I think nationally, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, especially at the defensive end.
Yeah, I thought Booker could be better against him than he has been so far. But yeah, he saved him in game one when Conley was really struggling, and then Conley the Conley Gobert pick and roll, throwing it back to the Utah days, just smoked Phoenix in game two. The
other thing they've done with Alexander Walker, they have not played Monty Morris as a backup point guard. They put in Alexander Walker with Ant, and then when they bring in Monty Morris, it's against a bench unit next to Conley. So I think that's been really interesting.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned Vogel too in some of the disappointing coaching performances, like overreact, like putting 2 on the ball on the Conley Gobert pick and roll. I mean, you gotta just fucking defend that in the conventional way. Like I know they got a couple of things in the first half with that, but it's like you can't be giving up a dunk out of that like immediately. That wasn't too great. And just their overall offensive process. Now he's got plenty of stubborn superstars. We could talk about that.
Yeah, I also thought Vogel lost his shit on the sidelines in game 2. It was a bad call, right? Like Durant, ball clearly went off Naz Reid's foot. But Vogel's like losing his mind, but also not challenging it. And then,
well, that's why he was losing his mind because he couldn't challenge because they had used up basically all of their timeouts earlier. Like Booker called one when he was on the ground. He called another one to stop a run. So like that's why he was so pissed off, because he knew he couldn't challenge it, or he would have just been completely out of timeouts at the end. Though, and in the end, that didn't matter. So I think that's why. I mean, it probably just feeling powerless like led to him just like totally losing it. But yeah,
I
mean,
think he was, but he was on tilt from that moment forward. You could see it on the sideline. It's pretty rare for a guy who's usually pretty composed on the sideline.
Who have you been most disappointed in, player wise?
So, I I don't know if we'd call Jalen Brunson a disappointment because we sort of expected this might happen. Whereas with Devin Booker, I think it's more genuinely surprising. Like I thought, even whatever with Minnesota's defense and stuff, I thought he'd still get his buckets, get 25 to 30, whatever. And like he just hasn't done it.
Easily the most disappointing player of the playoffs to me, and like I've consistently ranked him above Ant in my shooting guard rankings, and I thought he was just going to be pretty decent in this, and I think part of what's been a really good move by Chris Finch, part of the genius of starting Anthony Towns in game one on KD, was that then McDaniels could move over to Booker, and McDaniels has really frustrated Booker, and then Alexander Walker has been great too, and they had to move McDaniels to the 4 in game 2. Tyrese Halliburton has been like even worse as a scorer in these first 2 games than he was after the injury. Just like now they didn't need him because they were going crazy in game 2, but like they're gonna need him to like beat somebody in an isolation at some point, or like actually get inside the arc.
While we're talking about Hallie, can we dial it back a little? We got to give Pascal Siakam his flowers.
Oh sure, I mean, we got to.
He kicked the Bucks' ass in game 2. And I know
in game 1 as well. It just he's the only guy who came to play in game 1.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that one is, and he was also good defensively as well. I think that was the other thing, that he, as the low man, he made some pretty good plays. He was a big part of their 2-point defense being solid. I will give Carlisle some credit too, of like actually getting them to defend more at the rim than they have in the past. Not that the Bucks have anyone dominating there, but they've been so over-indexed on stopping the 3-point line all season. I think that changing that up at least a little bit was reasonable. Let's see here. I mean, Bradley Beal obviously has really struggled. Also, he's done nothing. Brunson, you have to, for a guy who's like top 5 in MVP probably.
Yeah.
You got to say that like, I mean, he's made 9 and 8 field goals out of like almost 60 attempts in the first 2 games. Like that's just not going to work. Franz Wagner didn't have much. He was 3 of 13 from 2, I believe, in game 2. So that hasn't really worked. They've also just not guarded him from the 3-point line. They did make 2 of 4 in game 2, but like him not being guarded has been a big problem. Paolo, I knew it was going to be kind of a struggle for him, but he's turned it over 15 times.
The turnovers, right? That's been even more than the inefficient shooting.
Cole Anthony, we mentioned, and Jamal Murray's had 2 pretty darn rough games. I know he hit the game winner at the end, but that's actually that was another coaching thing I wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. Darvin Ham. What do you think of this? Is this just like outcome-based decision-making, or do you have to say that, hey, you went to LeBron and AD switching the Murray-Jokic pick and roll, and they scored 6 points in 3 possessions in the last minute?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Jokic got one of those buckets on Rui, if I remember right.
No. So the last minute of the game, they just ran the Jokic-Murray 2-man game. Murray got a foul on LeBron. Then he hit another elbow jumper on LeBron, and then he hit that last one on AD, switching on him. But those were the 3 that I was talking about. Because I think it was after there was a timeout, and then they came out, ran an ATO to get LeBron to the basket, and then they ended up. That was the adjustment. But anyway, is that a bad idea, or did it just not go right?
I just think the Lakers' options are so limited with that roster. Like, oh, they didn't put in their wing defensive stopper. Oh wait, they don't have one. Like all their like sized guys to put on Murray just get cooked, right? I know Murray had a bad
I'd like
game.
to
Like,
see more Gabe Vincent, but I'm not saying he's necessarily a panacea. I think he's actually more useful as just a team defender, even to just add some defensive intensity. With like Reeves, Russell. Reeves actually been good on Murray, but
yeah,
Russell, Hachimura, Prince, like these guys, like trying to like make rotations, like they're just they just lack any kind of intensity with that.
yeah. So I just think like, and game one, like AD ran out of gas at the end because they played him 45 minutes, but they played him 45 minutes because you look at the bag of shit they had on the bench. It was like, how else do you want me to win this game, right? So I'm not sure he's chosen always the best option from his list of extremely suboptimal options, but I think you have to account for the fact of just how limited the rest of that roster is around LeBron and AD.
Yeah, in terms of disappointments, the three teams with these like supposedly like great veteran players, Phoenix, Clippers, LA, their offense, particularly late in games, I mean, Phoenix hasn't gotten there, but it's just, I mean, I guess these guys have just always been able to do it without having like a great offensive process, but they just like, they hold the ball and they hold the ball and they think they have the mismatch, but they don't. And then they don't even start moving until there's 5 on the shot clock. They never change sides of the floor. They like, the thing that kills, it's like, okay, the guy will like, someone will come up to set a screen for them, and maybe the defender will kind of ice them away from the screen, and then they just stand there like they don't even dribble, like they just, and the guy said the screen's like, well, I guess I'll just go away, like fine, all right, we just wasted 10 seconds. And
that was
like
the funniest when the screener's just like, okay,
I'm
I'm ghosting this, I guess.
I mean, at
Like,
least in at least in the 98 All-Star game, Kobe had the dignity to wave Karl Malone away before he just tried to go set the screen, right? Yeah, so just like, and obviously these guys are all exhausted at the end of these games. I get that, but like for Minnesota, we got Rudy Gobert switched on the perimeter. Oh, he's so slow. We're gonna just go right by Rudy Gobert. Like it. Oh, like move the ball. You got Rudy Gobert stuck on your best shooter. Move the ball, and you have these two other all-stars who should now be able to attack with Rudy Gobert stuck at the 3-point line, and they haven't done that once.
No,
Every single time he gets switched out there.
I mean, the Clippers gave you the menu for how to deal with Gobert, which is you have to get him out on the perimeter, and then you attack the void that's left behind. I mean, it's a formula for dealing with any shot blocker, basically, but because I mean, Minnesota has a little bit of secondary shot blocking, I guess, with McDaniels. But now that you're dealing with much more pliable defenders when you attack the other 4 guys and Gobert isn't behind them, and they just haven't done that. And then with Phoenix, with New Orleans, with the Lakers, a little too much dependence on the tough 2 express too.
No, I agree with that. So let's see. What was the best game so far?
Got to be Knicks Sixers game 2. I mean, I know Murray's shot was really cool, but that Knicks Sixers game was just, it was the whole game. It was just back and forth. That was
atmosphere, the crazy sequence. Yeah, Dan had this stat for us that it was one of, I think, 3 games in which a team had the ball down 5 in the last 30 seconds and came back to win, and the first in which that's happened in regulation in, like, I don't know, the last like 20 years or something. Maybe it's whatever the play-by-play database is on Basketball Reference. So yeah, I mean, there's some of the most famous games in history, like Heat Spurs game 6 in 2013 was one of them. Like, so some really classic games I remember. Let's see here. Denver Lakers game 2 is pretty good too, but that's that's like the series had never really felt totally in jeopardy there. And yeah, they had a 20-point comeback. It was a great game down the end. You had some great performances, but yeah, I would say Knicks Sixers. Uh, worst game
I thought the Thunder and Pelicans, the first half, I thought both teams absolutely sucked in game
in
one.
game one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like it
Well, but it
definitely
was close at
it was
least.
close. It built up. It was interesting, but I thought both teams played very poorly at the outset of that game. The worst game from an entertainment. I mean, Boston Miami game one was a total shit kick. I mean, both the Cleveland Orlando games have been not that interesting.
Yeah, game two of Cleveland Orlando. That's got to be it because it was the exact same game as game one, essentially. Like you just knew exactly what was coming, and then it happened. The only benefit was that it was
Banished
going on at
NBA
the same
TV.
time as the other games. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, best individual performance in a game.
Yeah, I thought Tyrese Maxey was really good in game two. Uh, Tyler Hero was really good last night, obviously, as was, most of the guys on Miami were kind of outlier good last night. Caleb Martin, Bam was really good.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, I thought Chet was really, focuses on Shea. I thought Chet was really good yesterday too.
Yeah, I mean, 20 points in 12 minutes in the first half. It was pretty impressive. New Orleans can't get anything against him at the rim either on a drive. Like maybe Valanciunas could like get an offensive rebound or a post up every now and then. Also, like maybe they should try to duck him in instead of just like feeding him and letting him like pound the ball 8 times in a row. I still think also I would consider double teaming off of that if I'm OKC just because it's an opportunity because he doesn't deal with double teams very well. You could get a turnover there. Edwards game one obviously was amazing. Siakam's game two was amazing. I thought Shea's game two was unbelievable. Like that is to me was the most unstoppable anyone has looked. Of just a team having no answers for him, admittedly with the great spacing they have. And Jokic's game one also was just a complete destruction.
How about
we forgot in terms, yeah.
LeBron, I thought played really great in game two, especially. In that fourth quarter, he had that 3 rim out, unfortunately, right before Murray's shot. But I think we would have been writing a lot about LeBron if that shot had gone down.
For sure. Yeah. In terms of adjustments, I'm sorry I forgot this. Malone taking Jokic off of AD and putting him on a Hachimura, that completely changed the game. He did that when it was 68-48, and the Lakers offense short-circuited entirely after that. That was a great adjustment.
Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah. So that was first team all playoffs. I'll throw it out there. I got Shea, Tyrese Maxey, Siakam, Nikola Jokic, and I'm going to put Rudy Gobert out there. We'll give Rudy Gobert his to hold Phoenix to under 100 points in the first 2 games. Like he's the biggest reason for that. Apologies to Dame.
Him over Ant or McDaniels. I guess it's just the one game, so you can't really put him on there.
Yeah, I would absolutely go with him over Ant. I mean, he's the reason that in the end that Phoenix just can't score at all. Dame Lillard, who also his game one was amazing, and then the second half of that just didn't matter. Like he had 35 in the first half. That's got to get some mention.
Yeah,
as well.
I think LeBron's got to make honorable mention here too.
Yeah, Kyrie has been really solid. Also, I would say. All right, last category here. Before we'll take a couple questions too.
The Crucible
who has withstood
the playoff.
and who has turned to ash.
Oh man!
After you,
I would say we've talked about a couple of these guys already, but Deuce McBride and Nickeil Alexander-Walker have passed their test, right?
Yeah, I mean the test continues in the next game, but yeah, so far, Ben Shepherd, who I thought was so miserable in game one and just like shouldn't be in a playoff rotation. He was actually pretty good. He was in the plus minus in game two. Also, though,
wait. AJ Green scored on that ISO against Shepard. Now he banked the shot in by accident, but Shepard also fouled him.
Oh man, I mean, I think that is more to do with the fact that Milwaukee is like not a real playoff team right now. I mean, that's why that game one was so disappointing to me for Indiana.
Yeah,
Where it's just like to come out like they've so much more talent than this version of Milwaukee. DeLon Wright surprisingly has like hit enough shots to stay out there.
former Grizzlies legend. Yeah, I would say Miami's, second line guys in general have held up pretty well. Like Jovic, who I feel like is a sub that they hide in the starting lineup, but he's been solid. They put him on Vooch in the play-in game. I mean, maybe this is, partly a discussion about Vooch too, but like no consequences at all from going with that matchup.
Well, they also put him on Porzingis.
They put him on Porzingis, okay. Yeah. Like him being in that lineup is what allows them to have Bam wander out and guard these perimeter guys at the start of the game.
And then he also has taken the backup center job, at least in the second half, from Kevin Love as well. And he also, like, he can grab and go. He gives them a little bit of pushing the ball for a team that, isn't playing a traditional point guard right now. Kleba, I wasn't sure where it was going to be for him, particularly after game one.
Nate, yeah. I'm still not sure where it is. I mean, they just don't respect him from the perimeter at all. We'll see if that changes as the series goes on. But he's probably a better option than Gafford and Lively in some cases because he lets them play 5 out a little more. But like, is it really 5 out if they aren't guarding you anyway? So I'm not sure about that.
Yeah,
one.
But he's way better than them defensively, and he can switch. Like, I don't think those guys are giving them a ton on the offensive end either at this point. Particularly Gafford in his current state. And they have like having the rim running center works when you have spacing around him. But if you don't, then he's just clogging it up even more. At least he'll stand on the perimeter. And I think that series is going to be like an absolute slog, like a defensive series where you just have these stars like taking a bunch of bad shots and whoever makes more of them. Maybe it'll open up a little bit in Dallas. Let's see. Yeah. So that's Jalen Williams in OKC. Like, looks like they took Kenrich out of the rotation after game one. He's just been the main guy there. Jalen Williams, the big, obviously. Ash, who has turned to ash.
Okay. So we need to talk about Buddy Hield because I feel like this trade has hurt both teams. Like Buddy Hield has managed to not do shit for the Sixers, and yet the Pacers still miss him.
Yeah, and the Sixers just don't run enough plays for him, right? Like this, I feel this way with any of these movement shooters. Like if you're gonna have them out there, use them.
Yeah.
Jake Crowder has turned to ash, but they still are just like pouring the contents of the crucible out on the floor afterwards anyway.
Yeah, you could say that for a couple of these Milwaukee bench guys. I think you could say that for the Lakers backup guards. Like they have to play one of them, but they got another. I think they got a 40-minute bagel from their backup guards in game 2. Is that right? From Dinwiddie and Vincent.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Mason Plumlee, game 2. I mean, they brought him in when Zubac's got the fouls. He blew like 3 or 4 finishes within a very short amount of time. The one thing I
would try Tice there at this point. Yeah. What can you say?
Wow, I forgot Tice was on their team. Yeah, you're right. It might not be a bad option. Plumlee in game 1, I will say this, made a 2-handed layup while facing the basket. He did not reverse it over his head. That might be the first one of his career.
Spencer Dinwiddie, that was a terrible move, just playing him over Vincent at the start of game 1's fourth quarter. Jackson Hayes, they don't have anyone else. Maybe he'll keep playing, but he's been awful. Big surprise. Beasley, I mentioned, was down to 10 minutes. Dyson Daniels actually got excised. I think he should be back though. I think they should be going with like these like all wing units to just like try to
Yeah,
get better defensively because they're
I
not going to
think they
score
just
anyway. So you might as well
yeah.
just defend.
Yeah, I think you have to try to get him out there, get him to pester Shea and Jalen Williams.
Jose, they just have too much size for him. That's the other problem too. And so, and without him, they don't get any kind of like they're not turning him over as much. That's the amazing thing about OKC is they never turn it over. That was like such an outlier for Shea to have all those turnovers in game one, and then they don't get any steals. And Jose is the guy who like pushes the pace offensively. So they had 2 fast break points in the competitive portion of the game. 5% of possessions they ran on in the competitive portion of game 2. Precious Achua is not playing at all because Josh Hart will just play 48 minutes, no problem.
Well, it's that, and they're playing Bogdanovich, which I think is the right move because he gives them a little bit of secondary shot creation, especially when Brunson isn't out there.
He's the second best scorer on the team.
Yeah. So they've been able to run like some pin stuff for him or whatever, like just a little something extra, something for the Sixers to think about. I think that, they could also go to Alec Burks for shot creation, but ideally you want made shot creation, and Burks is just shot creation. So I think this is the right move.
All right, let's hit a couple of comments or questions here. Pete says, love the pod. Have listened for 7+ years. Can even tolerate watching your faces now. That's some love right there.
That might be a bridge too far for some people, but okay.
There's a YouTuber in the comments has been saying Jalen Williams should have been most improved. You want to hit on these award selections? We got six man most improved.
I'm not a big fan of voting second year guys for MIP. So yeah, Jalen Williams had a case if you're going to go that way. Even relative to like historical second year guys who have won it, his jump wasn't quite as explosive as some of the others that have been big enough to win it. So I sort of understand that. The 6 man was interesting because the vote was so close, and yet the guy who should have won finished 5th. Like Bogdanovich had a better year than all those guys. Like, so was it held against him that he started 33 games? Maybe, but I mean, just.
But was it held against him that he plays for the Atlanta Hawks? Definitely.
Anti-Atlanta bias.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it was lost that he completely saved their season when Trey went out. Being able to put him in the starting lineup, that their offense was like a 120 with him on the floor. So no, I mean, I thought he should have won it too. That's just like people just don't look at that stuff. I don't think Naz Reid is like an unworthy winner, although I do like to have a guy who's an option for closing games for you when your team is healthy. So Monk probably would have won it if he hadn't gotten hurt. He would have been my second guy. It's hard to parse between the 100th and 101st best player in the league.
That's the whole problem with the 6 man award. It's like, of the guys who aren't good enough to start, who's the best player? Like come on, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's just, well, it basically exists so that guys who don't start have like some way that they're being recognized. So within the team concept, they're not going to feel as shitty about not starting. That's basically why that exists.
I guess. I mean, it's I'm just glad a shoot first guard who plays no defense didn't win the award for once. That, at least we went
now
a
it's a shoot first forward who plays no defense. He's been better, but he doesn't rebound. That's actually probably one of the bigger things that got him taken off the floor. Landon says, thoughts on AD's rant to the media about not being a defensive player of the year consideration. I would say the Lakers defensive numbers aren't any good. He's had some bad shooting luck, but like after the All-Star break, they're like a bottom 5 defense, certainly among teams that were trying. So I think I mean, he had a great chance to show us on the last play in Denver. And I just think when you compare him to Gobert, the big thing that stands out is the conditioning and the physicality and just kind of the 48 minutes of determined effort. Whereas AD does it in spots, but he takes more plays off. He takes transitions off, and Gobert just freaking goes.
That to me is the big difference between those two.
No, I completely agree there. And yeah, I mean, he just didn't have any kind of a statistical argument in terms of the team defense.
Yeah,
Any metric
100%.
that we look at, like the rim protection numbers are good, but not amazing. I
Exactly.
think there are moments where AD could ramp it up to be the best defensive player in the playoffs, but like the Lakers defense wasn't good enough. And you can compare him, like if you look at where the Jazz defense was with Gobert on the floor in 21 and 22, I would say they have kind of similar defensive talent around Davis as those Jazz teams had around Gobert. And like they were a top 5 defense when Gobert was on the floor still with nobody else around him. So I like AD's not capable of doing that to me. Alex says, and then for the guys talking about Jalen Williams, just to react to that, like yeah, I mean I generally don't go for second year players. I made an exception for Luka just because he got into MVP consideration his second year. But yeah, I think statistically, Jalen Williams, he had the largest increase in EPM year over year. He was like not even starting, and he was like pretty close to all-star level this year. I was actually surprised Kobe White was that high because just generally he
Right?
didn't ascend to a high enough level to where
His was
yeah.
really like Maxi's was a little bit too, but Kobe White's was really about a change in minutes and touches, and his efficiency didn't jump that much. Um, so I was really surprised to see him second too.
Well, I that part didn't. I think he would have been on probably in my top 5, but it's more just that he's not like close to being an all-star even after the improvement.
Yeah, yeah,
That to me is more what the history of the last 10 years, which I think is what it should be, right? Like, you go look at some of these guys in the 90s, like Isaac Austin won it one year. It's like Isaac Austin never mattered in the league. Like give
yeah,
the award to someone who actually matters in the league.
yeah.
Um. Uh. Any thoughts on the Suns making a comeback against Minnesota?
I would
We
not
could
rule it
close
out
on
yet
this.
just because of the individual talent on the perimeter on that team. I'm a little worried that I don't know what we're going to see from Grayson Allen, and I do think he's an important guy for them because he's just able to get up a volume of shots from threes. Like Royce O'Neal is probably going to play, gives him a little more defensively, but like he gets the yips from three, like he'll pull the ball down, doesn't want to shoot it. Eric Gordon maybe will fit in there somewhere. He hasn't been that good so far.
Yeah, I presume he'll start.
Yeah, you would think probably Gordon starts and they bring O'Neal off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they could start O'Neal too, get a little more size. So yeah, I mean, I don't love it, particularly because Booker has just been completely shut down. Like he and Beal just have to those guys have to dominate, and they
And
just
then
hit
the other
even in
thing,
yeah.
the other thing without Allen, it's one less player to have in that perimeter rotation for you to potentially go with a KD at 5 look, which I think is the one thing they tried a little in game 1, right? And Minnesota's pretty much ready for it, but their numbers with KD at 5 are so good. Like I think they have to take Eubanks out of the rotation, try KD at 5, and just see what happens.
Yeah, and I'd like to see them play Bol too. Just to have someone who can finish around the interior. I just give the guy a shot. I know you don't trust him or whatever, but like, I would give that a shot at least. Actually, here is one more. This is just kind of interesting.
Okay.
Charlie says we could potentially have as many as 10 of the 12 guys on the USA Olympic roster either miss the playoffs or be done by the first round. That is.
Ooh.
That is a very. I was actually thinking of that the other day. I was glad that he brought that up. Now that's probably good for Team USA because there'll be fewer guys who bail out and get hurt.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's maybe these guys. That's probably your biggest takeaway overall for the whole arc of the league is, yeah, like the old guard is like kind of done. They might be kind of done. Like KD
Yeah.
and LeBron and Steph.
KD,
and,
LeBron, Steph. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even AD is another one who's going to be out there. So, doesn't feel great as an American basketball fan. Although I will say the Hoop Summit made me feel better about like kind of the next generation of guys that's coming up at this point for the U.S.
Yeah,
I think
because even the
that's going to be a pretty sick class.
world team guys, like those are some Americans on that team.
Yeah, Debanza is I think is going to be. I think he's already played for USA actually. So
Yeah.
All right, that will do it then. Thank you so much for joining us and. John and I will be back next week. That'll be exclusively, of course, on Dunked On Prime. Danny and I will be doing another live show after the games today, which of course will be the Dunked On podcast as well. And Danny and I will also be doing a live call of tonight's games as well. We'll do the end of Cleveland, Orlando, and Philly and New York. So you can join us there on playback. Till then.